Notre Dame's roster has been revealed. The defensive coaching staff is officially set. And we saw a couple of former Irish players make some of the biggest plays in the biggest football game of the year. We're breaking it all down right here on Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome in to Locked On Irish. This is your daily home for Notre Dame football. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is now the #1 sports podcast network, all thanks to your support. I'm Tyler Wojciak, Notre Dame alum and Fox Sports producer, and thank you so much for making this your first watch or listen of the day on Tuesday, February 10th. Before we dive into today's show, please take a second to subscribe to the YouTube channel or follow along wherever you get your podcasts if you have not done so already. And this episode is brought to you by Mazda. We put the same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment, putting in the work, that defines you. Stay tuned for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. All right, it is that time of year. Notre Dame revealed its official roster ahead of spring practice, and it has given us some fascinating clues about player development and roster construction that we're going to break down here in just a moment. Now, the roster is not officially set because the freshmen who are going to be enrolling in the summer still need to be added when the time comes. But when you have a freshman class where the vast majority of players are early enrollees and you get all the incoming transfer players, we learned a lot from this roster reveal. Plus, Marcus Freeman officially reshaped his defensive staff, and he made it clear who's in charge on that side of the ball. And on Sunday night, a couple of former Irish players, Julian and Rylie Mills, showed exactly what this football program is about by making plays on the biggest stage in football. So we have a lot to get into today. Let's start with Notre Dame's roster reveal. So they have 103 total players in the roster. Obviously, there's the new scholarship limit that was put into place, I believe, last season. So there is still room for more. They could technically add a player from the transfer portal. There are no players in the team who could enter the transfer portal because that window is passed. But as far as I know, there are still plenty of players in the transfer portal. So if Notre Dame decided they needed some help at the bottom of the roster, they could go in and add a player. But I think we have a really good idea of what this team is going to look like heading into spring practice. And I think one of the most revealing parts of these reveals at this point of the year is you get to see how some of the players' bodies have transformed in the offseason, who's bulking up, who's trying to slim down. And I think there are a couple notable ones that I want to go through here. We'll just kind of go through it by position. I just have a couple quick takeaways for each one. So nothing really stands out at quarterback other than the fact that Noah Grubbs, the incoming freshman, is wearing number 10. Obviously, a lot of great Notre Dame quarterbacks who have worn that number, so big shoes to fill for the true freshman. But at running back, I thought it was interesting that every single running back on the team is 5'11" or shorter. You don't need like a 6'2" running back, but I just thought it was kind of interesting how they all look the same for the most part, except for Kedron Young. He's always going to be the biggest guy in that room, although Kedron Young is down from weighing 242 pounds going into last season, and he was over 240 pounds his freshman year as well. He is now slimmed down to 226. I think that is particularly impressive when you consider the fact that he's recovering from a torn ACL injury where, it's probably pretty tough to really get after it in the weight room and lose weight when you're already dealing with the grueling rehab process. But credit to Kedron Young. I think he's going to be a better running back at 226 than he would be at 242. Now, he might not be quite as strong, but I think in terms of his quickness, his lateral ability, he'll make more of an impact at 226. I also thought it was interesting that Nolan James, who's going to be a redshirt freshman this season, he is now up to 212 pounds. It's good for him because he looked pretty small when he was out there on the field last season, so he needs to get his weight up. Looks like he's on that right track. And then the two incoming freshmen, Javian Osborne and Jonas Walton, are damn near identical. They're both 5'9". Osborne is 197 pounds, and Walton is 200 pounds. I was a little bit surprised by Walton's weight. Looks like they're both going to arrive on campus with bodies that are able to take on a season in college football, which, isn't always the case with the running backs, but I would not be surprised if Osborne is fighting for playing time very early on. The wide receiver position, Quincy Porter, we knew he had great size. Now it's official. He's 6'4", 197 pounds. That's like ideal height and weight for a boundary wide receiver. Maybe he could be a little bit heavier, but that 6'4" height and that wingspan is going to be very good. He has a very great catch radius. So if he's healthy and he can go out there, you throw it in that guy's vicinity, he should be able to come down with it. Mylan Graham, 6'1", 189 pounds, feels like a perfect field receiver. And I also noticed that Elijah Burris is up to 186 pounds. When he arrived on campus as an early enrollee this time last year, he was really skinny, but he showed a lot of burst, a lot of explosiveness, and that's why he was one of the stars of spring practice. Well, now it looks like he's up to 186 pounds, and he might be pushing for more playing time this year. It's going to be a little bit harder because there's a ton of really talented players in that room, but it now seems like he's got his body where it needs to be. And if he's able to understand the playbook and know where he needs to be when he's on the field, Elijah Burris is a player who could make some noise this season. Speaking of the wide receivers, though, this is a pretty small freshman wide receiver class, not in terms of total numbers, because Notre Dame brought in 5 freshman wide receivers in the class of 2026, but I mean literally. Braden Robinson is 5'7", 156 pounds. I was bigger than that in high school, and I was not very big. So Braden Robinson better run like a 3.9 40-yard dash, and it is possible. I mean, you watch his high school highlight tapes, he's very shifty, he's very fast, he's very difficult to bring down. But when I saw that, I was like, wow, 5'7", 156 for a D1 wide receiver. It's an uphill battle for him. But look, I am not someone who is going to put a limit on what a short wide receiver can do. So I'm hoping for the best for Braden Robinson. I'm not going to lie, when I saw those numbers, it surprised me a little bit, because I thought he was going to be closer to Bubba Frazier, who isn't that big either. Bubba Frazier is listed at 5'10", 175. So Notre Dame is bringing in a few slot receivers, but then I noticed Kadon Finley right there at 6'1", 200 pounds, very sturdy. I made the comparison before. It reminds me a lot of Jane Greathouse when he got on campus. Like, Greathouse was a guy who contributed for Notre Dame right away. I mean, hell, he scored 2 touchdowns in his first ever college football game. Not saying that Finley is going to do that, but he certainly looks the part, even though he's a true freshman. On the offensive line, I mean, nothing stood out to me, really. It's not like the roster reveal is going to indicate anything about Charles Jagasaw's health, which is obviously a huge question mark that we've talked about plenty on this show throughout the offseason. We're going to continue to talk about it until we get some official word from Marcus Freeman. But there were a couple things that stood out to me on the defensive line. Bryce Young is down to 264 pounds. I think that's down around 10 pounds about where he was at the start of last season. They bulked him up, and I think he was just playing a little bit slower. I think 264 pounds is a good size for him. He's 6'6". He has a great frame. So I think this year he is poised for a breakout season. 1 year later than I predicted for him, but still, I think Notre Dame would gladly take it in 2026. Rodney Dunham, the true freshman, steps on campus, 6'4", 230 pounds. Probably going to put on a little bit more weight, but as a true freshman, 230 is pretty solid. And there's Christopher Burgess Jr., the redshirt freshman, who's up to 299 pounds. That's encouraging because he's going to play on the interior now. And I have unfortunate news for everyone. Tiana Gray, the transfer from Oregon, is not as big as advertised. I was told he was 6'6", 336 pounds, but we were lied to. It's true. He's 6'5", 333 pounds. So he's not quite as big, but that is still a very large man. And it looks like he's going to be wearing number 0 for the Irish. That is going to be pretty funny to see there out in the field. Another transfer defensive tackle, Francis Brew. He's 6'1", 277. That is pretty light. I'm going to be honest. For a defensive tackle, I know he was listed at 280 at Pittsburgh, but 277 is definitely on the lower side. But when you can squat nearly 700 pounds like Brew can, I guess the weight doesn't really matter all that much because he's just that strong. Then you got Logan Thomas, who is down from 224 pounds to 207. This could be wrong, could be a clerical error, I don't know. But if it's true, and he's 207 pounds, I just don't know how you can put Logan Thomas on the field all that often as a defensive end. Like, that is just way too small. You can't be 6 pounds heavier than Notre Dame's true freshman wide receiver, Kadon Finley, and be an impact player for, several downs in a row. Like, you're not going to be a 3-down defensive end. And Logan Thomas is a really good pass rusher. I mean, he flashed a lot as a freshman. I believe he had a sack against Indiana in the playoff. He was in on the final play of the game against Georgia. Like, he is a very good pass rusher. It hasn't been able to work out for him just yet. He's dealt with injuries, but if that number is true, if he's 207, it's going to be difficult for him to get on the field. So we'll see. I'm sure Notre Dame, I'm sure people are going to ask Marcus Freeman about that. We'll see what the response is from him. But if you're looking for some other good news in the defensive line, Keon Keeley is down from 282 to 270 pounds. I think that's good for the Irish. And also Sean Civilova Jr. is down from 342 to 325 in what is going to be a critical year for him. Just got a couple more notes on the heights and weights here. Defensive backs, Joey O'Brien. The Kevin Durant theory is true. I knew it was true. I saw him in person, and now it is confirmed. Joey O'Brien was listed at 6'3" on the recruiting sites, and I saw him on campus at Notre Dame last year during his visit, and I'm like, that dude is at least 6'5", maybe even 6'6". He might be the first player ever to be taller than his height that was listed on the recruiting sites. And sure enough, Joey O'Brien, 6'5", 188 pounds. He's going to wear number 20. Kerry Adams, 6'1", 178. And then Aiden Pouncey. They got him listed as a corner, which I thought was interesting. He's 6'3", 172 pounds, so he's going to have to put on some weight. But that's a tall corner. And I honestly expected him to be at safety at Notre Dame because right now the Irish only have 6 scholarship safeties, and 3 are freshmen, including redshirt freshman Ethan Long. And 3 of those guys, Schuler, Johnson, and Talmadge, could all be gone after this season. Maybe this is temporary, but you look at that cornerback room, it is loaded. I thought that Aiden Pouncey might have a quicker path to playing time at safety, but it looks like the Notre Dame coaching staff likes him at corner. A couple other notes here. Punter, Jasper Scaife, is a unit, just in general, not even for a punter, right? He's 6'6", 215 pounds. So I thought that was, look, Notre Dame had Rendell. He was a huge dude too, and they never really ran him. But maybe Jasper is going to get out there on a fake punt. And lastly, Christian Gray, back to number 29. It just feels right. It just feels right. 6 didn't feel right for him last year. His best moments were number 29. I think Christian Gray is going to have a bounce back year this year in his original number. But that's really it. That's all I have for you on the heights and weights. Again, this is going to change. They're going to have another updated roster before the start of fall camp, and then we will be able to compare how these players have developed their bodies in the offseason with the strength and conditioning program, with spring practice. And we'll also talk about, is Ian Premer 6'7", 6'8"? Is he a pterodactyl? I don't know. We'll cover that in August. But coming up, Notre Dame made the hires of the 2 new defensive assistants official, but could we see even more movement on the staff? That's next. This episode is brought to you by Mazda's Moving the Game Forward for those who believe there's more to the score than what's on the screen. When I think about what that really means, I think about Marcus Freeman at Notre Dame. 4 years in, and what stands out isn't just the wins, it's the way he has built the program, the culture, the accountability, the way players talk about preparation and trust in one another. And it's the work that happens long before kickoff, in meetings, in practice, and how standards are set every single day. That's what moves a program forward. Not just the final score, but everything that leads up to it. It reminds us of what it really takes to raise the bar. It's that extra work off the court or the field, dialing in on every detail, giving it that extra fire, that grit, and I never quit. We put that same passion into every model. Highlights make the reel. What it took to get there makes it count. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. Today's episode is also brought to you by Wayfair. The new year is here, and it's the perfect time to reset your routine and refresh your space. If you're spending more time at home, you might as well love how it looks and feels. That's why you should turn to Wayfair. It's a one-stop shop for getting your home back on track. From bedding and mattresses to storage solutions for every room, Wayfair makes it easy to start the year fresh. Wayfair has everything you need for a full home refresh all in one place. Whether you're updating your living room, organizing your space, or upgrading your work from home setup, Wayfair's huge selection makes it easy to find exactly what works for your style and budget. I picked up new bedding from Wayfair recently, and it completely changed how my bedroom feels. It's cleaner and looks more put together. I loved that I could find pieces that matched my style without spending a fortune, and the shopping was easy, delivery was smooth, and everything arrived exactly as I expected. It honestly made getting back into a routine this new year feel a lot more manageable. Get organized, refreshed, and back on track this new year for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Welcome back to Locked On Irish. On Saturday, Notre Dame made the hires of Aaron Henry and Brian Jean-Marie official. We've known about these hires, right? Like we talked about it on the show when that news broke, but Notre Dame likes to take their time before they make an official announcement, but on Saturday, that announcement officially came. What I thought was really interesting, though, was Aaron Henry, the former defensive coordinator at Illinois, was named the defensive backs coach, which we expected, but he was also named the co-defensive coordinator. That is interesting to me. Brian Jean-Marie was also named the run game coordinator in addition to being the Notre Dame linebackers coach, but we're kind of familiar with that, right? Like Al Washington was going to be the run game coordinator, and then Mike Mickens was the defensive pass game coordinator. Usually those titles come with an increase in pay. How much does it actually impact, their jobs or responsibilities on the coaching staff? I'm not sure. I think that varies from staff to staff. But Mike Mickens was not co-defensive coordinator, and they promoted him as much as they possibly could, or so it felt. And I remember last year, after Al Golden had left, a lot of people, myself included, thought that Mike Mickens would be a legitimate candidate to be the next defensive coordinator. Marcus Freeman decided he did not think he was ready, but when he hired Chris Ash, there was also some level of assumption, or maybe a prediction is probably a better way to phrase it, that even though Notre Dame was going to hire an external hire in Chris Ash, Mike Mickens would probably be named co-defensive coordinator so that they could keep him around. And they almost lost him last season. They obviously lost him to the Baltimore Ravens a couple weeks ago, but Mike Mickens was looking at other college jobs last year. I mean, after he got passed over, I'm sure he was a little bit upset. I believe he interviewed for the job with Texas, but he didn't get it, and then he opted to stay at Notre Dame. Now, he continued to get a raise. He was getting paid over 7 figures, which is, really, really good for any college football coach out there, especially one who's not even a coordinator. But I was surprised that they didn't make him co-DC, not even in title. Again, and it does sort of create some weird dynamic because you have a guy like Mike Mickens who's been around the program for years, and then you bring in Chris Ash who's going to be calling the plays, and then there could be, some power struggle if you make that decision, which maybe is the reason why Marcus Freeman didn't do that, especially when Chris Ash was the new guy coming into a staff that had all the coaches had already been there. Defensive line coach and Al Washington, Max Bullough at linebackers, and Mike Mickens in the secondary. But now that they've essentially had to clean house for the most part, I mean, they still have other top assistants like Sebastian on the defensive line. He's still there. Trey Reeder is still there. So it's not like every single person on the defensive staff is gone, but the main guys, the main position coaches are all out the door. And what did Chris Ash do? He went out and he hired a couple of his guys. I would consider Charlie Partridge a Chris Ash guy, which is a great hire. We've talked about that at length. And then Aaron Henry is obviously a Chris Ash guy because Henry played for Ash when he was at Wisconsin. He coached with him before at Rutgers, so there is obviously a connection there. There is not a connection, as far as I know, with Brian Jean-Marie and Chris Ash, but they have Jean-Marie has the same agent as Marcus Freeman, so there's a connection there. And I think that, like Ash, Jean-Marie is a coach who's been around for a really long time. Jean-Marie has been coaching linebackers for over 20 years. Ash has been coaching for a really long time, so that makes sense. But now this is Chris Ash's defense, although he has a co-defensive coordinator. I wonder what Aaron Henry's responsibilities are going to be in terms of, is he actually going to be calling coverages? Is he going to be calling plays during the game? I find that hard to believe because it just seems like Marcus Freeman is going all in on Chris Ash. And if you had told me that during halftime of the Purdue game, I would have thought you were crazy, or maybe Marcus Freeman was crazy, because it felt like Marcus Freeman was ready to move on from Chris Ash at halftime of the Purdue game. But as we all know, they were able to bounce back a little bit in the second half of that game, and then they really took a step in the right direction in that win over Arkansas. And then from there, the defense was pretty much lights out. I mean, sure, they gave up some points to USC, but that happens. Mekhi Lemon was one of the best wide receivers in the country. Jacoby Lane is a good wide receiver as well, and they just took advantage of some holes in the Notre Dame defense. But even when Notre Dame beats USC and they beat them handily, USC is going to get some points, especially with Lincoln Rylie calling plays. I mean, we could call him all kinds of things, but you have to admit he's a very good play caller, except for when he tries to run a reverse pass to Mekhi Lemon in driving rain. But hey, I am glad that he did that. And statistically, though, the Notre Dame defense finished among the best in the country. They were 9th in opponent points per game. They were 9th in opponent yards per play, 7th in opponent yards per rush, and they were 14th in opponent pass yards per attempt. They finished top 5 in the country in interceptions. But I did notice this random stat. It felt like this during the season, like Notre Dame had the worst luck when they were jumping on fumbles. It felt like they always went the other way, and this stat backs it up. Notre Dame only had 2 fumble recoveries on the entire year. They had 21 interceptions, but only 2 fumble recoveries. Meanwhile, Texas Tech had 15 fumble recoveries. So, I don't know. I think a lot of times fumble recoveries are luck, not forced fumbles, but fumble recoveries, because who knows how the ball is going to bounce there. But anyway, just a random stat that I wanted to throw at you. But the other important stats, like scoring defense, opponent yards per play, all that stuff, it shows you that when you look at it by the numbers, Notre Dame had a really good season defensively, but the defense essentially cost them a berth in college football playoff by the way that they played in the first two games of the season. More so the second game. I mean, they just got beat on two really good plays by Miami in that season opener. C.J. Daniels made one of the best catches of the year, but a couple weird things happened on that play. Leonard Moore got beat on a double move, and then Adon Schuler didn't just take his head off when he had a clear path to do it. The first one, Malachi Toney matched up with Carson Hobbs, mouse in the house, mismatch there. Miami took advantage of it, although we just didn't really know how good Malachi Toney was at that point in the season. We eventually learned. I can assure you that they are not going to allow a redshirt freshman nickel defender to be covering Malachi Toney much in that game. That's going to be Leonard Moore all of next season. But still, Notre Dame had a really, had some tough moments in that game. They had a just horrendous game against A&M, which is inexcusable. They looked awful in the first half against Purdue while Leonard Moore was out and while Christian Gray was banged up and while Adon Schuler was also out because he had the targeting penalty in the game against Texas A&M. But then after that game, they really took off, although we do have to admit the schedule did get significantly easier after the first two games of the season. It does make you wonder a little bit, how confident would we be about this defense going into 2026? If we had seen them in the playoffs, we could be even more confident. We might be a little bit more concerned. I'm not sure. But the fact that Freeman let Ash lead on these two hires is clearly a vote of confidence. And also, he led the Charlie Partridge hire as well. And maybe Marcus Freeman liked the Partridge hire so much that he was like, you know what, if you can get another guy like him in, I'll let you cook. And then he got in Aaron Henry and then Brian John Murray. But I think the fact that Chris Ash is in that position, and obviously Marcus Freeman had to sign off on all these hires, but that didn't just happen overnight. Ash had to earn that, and I think Marcus Freeman has earned the benefit of the doubt. And if he is now given Chris Ash the benefit of the doubt as well, I think that tells you a lot about his trust in him, because Marcus Freeman has had an excellent track record of hiring coaches. He's not bad at 1,000. Chancey Stuckey did not hit. Jared Parker, being promoted offensive coordinator, was not a hit, despite all the twists and turns that led to that point. But Aaron Henry has a great track record of developing corners. Brian Jean Marie is going to have a different task because Notre Dame runs 4-2-5 defense now with only two linebackers on the field. They already have they have five really talented linebackers. Four are going to be healthy at the start of the year, and then they get KVA back. So those guys should be in really good shape for next season. But is the Notre Dame staff officially done? It's hard to say because it seems like Marty Biagi is more secure at Notre Dame than he was a couple weeks ago. Ohio State was looking at him hard to be their special teams coordinator. They were able to hire Illinois special teams coordinator for their job. He was getting some NFL interest. I have not heard that much as of late, but John Bryce from Football Scoop reiterated that Loren Lando, Notre Dame's strength and conditioning coach, remains a candidate for the job with the Las Vegas Raiders and the Arizona Cardinals. Clint Kubiak, the former Seahawks offensive coordinator, was hired to be the head coach for the Las Vegas Raiders, and Kubiak and Lando have a relationship dating back to their days together in Denver. And look, if Lando wants to go back to the NFL and he's dead set on that decision, it's going to be hard to convince him to stay. However, I'm not sure why that would be. Okay, because he's already one of the highest paid strength coaches in college football, has been that way since the moment he was hired. He was paid over $1 million from day one. Plus, Notre Dame reworked his contract, so he remains one of the highest paid strength coaches in the country. I'm not sure if there is a giant discrepancy between what a strength and conditioning coach makes in the NFL as opposed to college. And, for all the concerns we hear about the calendar for college football coaches and how they got to travel around the country with recruiting and the transfer portal, all that. I totally get it. But how much does that apply to the strength and conditioning coach? Because, Loren Lando isn't out there recruiting. His schedule is a lot more fixed. It's regulated. It's like the NFL in a sense that he doesn't have to fly around the country to meet with 16-year-olds and their families, even though they know it's probably a long shot that kid will ever end up at Notre Dame. He's focused on campus in South Bend. He's got a schedule. They know the workouts. It's pretty clearly defined when they can work out in the winter or the summer. And then obviously you have to continue to do stuff during practice and during the season as well. So to me, I feel like a strength and conditioning coach would not have to deal with the same issues that, every other assistant or the head coach would have to deal with. Now, could I be wrong here? Sure, maybe he just wants to go back to the NFL because the NFL is the pinnacle of football. If he wants to get back to Vegas or Arizona because it's closer to his hometown in Denver, maybe that's it. But people who I've talked to at Notre Dame are confident they'll be able to keep him. Does that mean he's guaranteed to stay? Absolutely not. There's always a chance that these coaches could leave for a variety of different reasons, but I think Lando is a great situation at Notre Dame too. If he leaves, that would be a big blow to the program because he's really good at his job and the timing would be tough, which is why I think Notre Dame is going to do everything they can to keep him, and ultimately, I think they will. Again, I could be wrong on this. Maybe he just wants to go back to the league. If he does that, then I'll say I was wrong, and we'll talk about potential candidates to replace him. But, for as much concern as there is, I do feel like Notre Dame is in a good shape. I'm never going to say that the staff is officially done until the start of training camp. If you were listening to the show last week, I made that rule. But I like where Notre Dame is at. I like the hires of Aaron Henry and Brian John Marie. I like the work that they've done to retain everyone on the offensive staff, and now they're working hard to retain Lauren Lando. This is what happens when you have a really great coaching staff, but going into next season, I feel like Notre Dame is going to have one of the best coaching staffs in the entire country once again. All right, coming up, multiple Notre Dame players showed up when the lights were brightest on Sunday night. How Rylie Mills and Julian Love helped lead the Seahawks to a Super Bowl victory right after this. Thank you for making Locked On Irish your first watch or listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. If you're not already, make sure you check out our new Everydayer Club. You'll get access to an ad-free audio feed for Locked On Irish. It's the same show, same schedule, just no ads, and works on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever podcast app you use. If you listen every day, it's a really easy upgrade. Just go to lockedonirish.supercast.com or tap the link in the show notes to learn more. Today's episode is brought to you by TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives a real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year. Just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. All right, before we get out of here, I did want to give a shout out to Julian Love and Rylie Mills, two former Notre Dame players who are now Super Bowl champions. And not only that, they both made big plays in order to make that happen. Not the most entertaining game. I think that's fair to say. Is it the most boring Super Bowl ever? I would say no. The most boring Super Bowl game that I can remember was the Patriots-Rams game. I believe it was the 2018 season. That was ridiculously boring, although the fact that the Patriots could not pull away made that game technically close, even though it never really felt that way. And then obviously you've got the blowout in the Super Bowl when the Seahawks blew out the Broncos. So I guess maybe that's the story here. If the Seahawks are in the Super Bowl, it's either going to be one of the craziest endings we've ever seen, like the Malcolm Butler interception, or it's just going to be incredibly boring. This year, it was boring, but what was not boring was Rylie Mills' sack on Drake May. Not going to lie, it caught me completely off guard. I was watching it at a party at my friend's house, and I didn't even know that Rylie Mills was active for this game because obviously he suffered that torn ACL injury in the first round of the college football playoff last season when he was still on Notre Dame, gets in the backfield, makes a nice play, but then I think him and Bryce Young, he rolled up on him or something. Rylie Mills had a pretty significant tear of his ACL. And as we've talked about before, not all ACL injuries are the same. He had a pretty nasty one, so he was out for a long time, only played 34 snaps for the Seahawks this season. But in the biggest game of his life, he just runs through the guard on the Patriots, just walks him down, sacks Drake May in the backfield. And as our friend from the program, Greg Fumunk, pointed out on Twitter, Rylie Mills also had 2 sacks on Drake May a few years ago at Notre Dame. So he has now had 3 career sacks on Drake May, but this one in the biggest game of his life. And I am just so happy for Rylie Mills. I can't even imagine what it was like for Mills to watch Notre Dame against Georgia and against Penn State, and then certainly in the national championship against Ohio State when he was a captain. And you're watching your team go on this incredible run, and you wish you could do anything to be out there on the field. And I'm sure the thought went through his mind, is he ever going to have the opportunity again to compete on the biggest stage? Well, He didn't even have to wait that long. He did it 1 year later, just 13 months removed from his knee injury, and he goes out there and he gets a sack. So awesome for him. Watching his post-game interview when he was like, I just ran through his face. And last night I was saying, no more thinking. It's time to F and go. And you know what? Salute to him. He went out there and did it. Really happy for him. Also really happy for Julian Love, who came up with a big interception late. It was one of the worst passes I have ever seen in the Super Bowl by a quarterback. Drake May just lofted it up there. Julian Love caught it like he was catching a punt, had a nice return. I actually thought he was going to take it to the house, and I had flashbacks to Mike Tirico's call when Julian Love had that interception return for a touchdown against NC State back in 2017. But unfortunately for Love, he was not able to return it for a touchdown. It was still a great play by him. He had a great game in this one, bounced back from a tough missed tackle earlier in the game. But look, Notre Dame showed out in this game. They've been showing out in the pros for a while now. I mean, you look at the safety position, Notre Dame might be safety U now because you got Julian Love. You've got Kyle Hamilton, who's the best safety in the NFL. You've got Xavier Watts, who should have won Rookie of the Year. He's next up. He's going to be a great safety in the NFL. Harrison Smith is going to retire. He's also going to be in Canton one day as a member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Alohi Gilman is still out there. He's still starting this year. He got traded from the Chargers to the Ravens, but that's a pretty damn good list. So Notre Dame has been putting more players in the NFL, and now those guys are out there making big plays in the biggest moments, and that's big for Notre Dame because it's not just that like, oh, cool, a couple guys that we watch play and Notre Dame are now, in the Super Bowl. They get a ring, good for them. No, the fact that they're out there making plays is something that the Notre Dame coaching staff can really lean into. That's going to resonate with recruits. It's going to resonate with transfer portal prospects, and I think it resonates around the league to see guys like Rylie Mills go out there and get a sack, and Julian Love, who actually converted positions from corner to safety, get an interception in the Super Bowl is a big deal. Obviously, it's huge for them. Those are moments that they're going to remember the rest of their lives, but now Notre Dame can say, hey, if you want to do that, if you want to make plays like that in the Super Bowl, come to Notre Dame, and that's a possibility. All right, that's going to do it for me today. Thanks again for making this your first watch or listen of the day. Please subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast. And don't forget, if you enjoy the show, like the video below if you're watching along on YouTube, or rate the podcast 5 stars, leave a review. It really helps us out. And by the way, if you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Irish ad-free, plus members-only Discord access and more. Head to lockedonirish.supercast.com to join the club. By the time that you are watching or listening to this, I'm going to be on the road for a work trip that is going to keep me very busy, but I'm hoping to have another episode out tomorrow morning. Probably going to have to record it very late at night from my hotel room. As long as I can make that happen, I will be back here tomorrow, and we're going to talk about Notre Dame's depth chart on offense heading into spring practice. I'll see you then.